I never thought I'd be the kind of wife who counted condoms in her husband's car. But there they were. 5. Neatly tucked away like souvenirs of betrayal. That night, instead of crying, I reached for a jar of red pepper powder. If he wanted to play with fire, I'd let him feel the burn. And as I stood by the window, waiting for his screams to echo through the house, I realized this wasn't just about cheating. This was about 45 years of lies exploding in one unforgettable night. Before I reveal how everything spiraled to this moment, let's take a breath. If you're new here, hit subscribe to Twist Stories and tap the bell. This channel is where sacrifice, betrayal, and jaw-dropping twists come alive every week. And you, yes, you watching now, I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from? Drop your city or state in the comments. You might find that tonight's story isn't so far from your own. All right, let's rewind to the night when it all truly began. My name is Margaret Montgomery, though everyone calls me Maggie. I'm 67 years old, a wife of 45 years who thought she knew her husband. That illusion shattered the day I opened his Lexus glove compartment and found 5 condoms, brand new, waiting like trophies of betrayal. But that wasn't the first warning. First came the lipstick, crimson red, smeared across his starched collar. Then the perfume. Not mine. Too young, too sweet. I even found the bottle under the passenger seat, embossed with a name I would never forget, Catherine Reynolds. And yet, when I confronted him, he laughed. Blamed my own sister. Shrugged off the perfume. But condoms? Tell me, what 70-year-old man keeps those unless he's planning a second life? That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I reached for a jar of red pepper powder and whispered to myself, if he wants to play with fire, I'll let him feel the burn. Do you know that feeling when all your sacrifices, the years, the family, the silence, suddenly mean nothing? If you've ever had your loyalty dismissed, you're not alone. Share in the comments. What's the biggest thing you've given up for your family? Soon we were celebrating our 45th wedding anniversary. Robert wanted chandeliers and applause at the country club. I wanted demolition day. So while he strutted like a king, I planned every detail. The private investigator, the files, the evidence, and one small request to the baker. Just the bride figurine, I told her, and 2 words in red, the truth. The night came. Laughter, wine, and his mistress Catherine sitting quietly at a corner table, disguised as a friend. No one suspected, no one but me. And when the cake rolled in, gleaming under the lights, I smiled for the first time in years, because tonight, everything he built was about to collapse. By the week of our celebration, my plan had as many layers as the buttercream roses on that lonely bride cake. For 45 years, I'd been the soft-spoken wife, ironing cuffs, saying grace, swallowing every insult. But when you've been lied to long enough, a strange stillness takes hold of you, the stillness of a lake right before a storm, flat, quiet, deceptive. On my kitchen table, Angela Carter's manila folders lay open like a second dinner setting. Receipts, hotel invoices, photographs of Bob and Catherine Reynolds slipping into a boutique hotel by the river, his hand on her back as if mine had never been there. Screenshots of wire transfers, $30,000 into a joint account with her name, and an email subject line that still tastes like iron on my tongue, Island Plans. I closed my eyes and whispered the line my mother used when sewing a hem. Measure twice, cut once. This time, the cut would be clean. The country club coordinator thought I was fussing over flowers and centerpieces. In truth, I was calculating a battlefield. Who would face the screen? Who would sit near the cake? Where the microphone would be when I stood up, not as the smiling wife, but as a witness. I placed Reverend Johnson's table front and center, not to bless us, but to anchor the room with the man who'd praised Robert's devotion for years. Mrs. Thompson, The neighbor, by whose hedges Robert often parked, got a seat with a perfect view of the projector. Carol Miller, my sharp-eyed sentinel, sat at my right hand, and Daniel, our son, my heart with legs. I positioned him at the family table directly between me and the truth, as if I could shield him from it when it landed. He's a good man, my Daniel, the kind who still asks if I need help twisting jar lids. He'd spent years skimming over the cracks in our house. That night, he'd have no choice but to look. The day before the party, I went downtown to see an attorney named Sharon White. She looked at me like she'd known 1,000 Maggies before. "You don't need to become someone else," she said after I spread Angela's files across her desk. "You need to be the most documented version of yourself." We built a list: marital assets, retirement accounts, deeds. She told me what was community property, what could be clawed back, what proof mattered. She taught me the difference between rage and evidence. I walked out lighter, papers in my bag like a spine I hadn't felt in years. If you've ever had to choose between your dignity and keeping the peace, tell me, what gave you the courage to draw a line? Here's the part you'll judge me for. On the morning of the anniversary, after Bob showered and hummed like a man about to receive a Medal of Honor, I offered him a massage oil for his back pain. A dab at his shoulders, then his wrists. Nothing dangerous, nothing permanent, just enough to ensure that when the pressure of that night mounted, his body would beg to leave long before his mouth could invent a lie. Call it poetic justice. Call it a wife refusing to be talked over one more time. "Smells nice," he said, buttoning his cufflinks. "It's called the truth," I replied, and smiled at my little joke. That afternoon, I tested the projector twice in the empty banquet hall. The club manager showed me how to switch from the slideshow of our family's sanitized memories, vacations, church suppers, to Angela's evidence folder, dates, screenshots, side-by-side bank statements, like a chorus, singing the same pitiless refrain. I tucked the USB into a velvet ring box. Beside it, the cake knife, polished, heavy, engraved with our initials. A ceremonial blade, but tonight I'd cut more than frosting. Mini cliffhanger. Would my hands shake when the moment came, or would years of silence steady them? The guests arrived in waves, perfume clouds, sugar smiles, the minor chords of polite laughter. Linda, my sister, squeezed my elbows and searched my face the way sisters do when they sense the storm. "You sure?" she mouthed. I nodded. Bob entered like a man unveiling a statue of himself. He clapped backs, cracked jokes worn smooth by decades. When Catherine slipped in, champagne dress, hair like a commercial, she kissed the air near Carol's cheek and slid into her seat near the petunias centerpiece I'd chosen with clinical care. Place card scripted formally. Catherine Reynolds, not Kate. I wanted the record to be official. 45 years, Reverend Johnson boomed when he reached me. "You and Robert are an inspiration." I folded my hands. "We will certainly inspire something tonight, Reverend." Have you ever smiled through a speech you knew was built on a lie? Did your chest tighten, your jaw clench? Breathe with me for a moment. Bob took the microphone first, as I knew he would. He was handsome in that aging colonel way that makes strangers assume a history of honor. "To my Maggie," he said, and the room sighed. 45 years of grace. I don't deserve her. You can tell a sentence that contains the truth and still be lying. That's a talent adulterers hone. He listed my virtues like a roll call. Patient, loyal, steadfast. Words that once felt like medals now sounded like shackles. He ended with something he'd likely practiced in the mirror. Here's to 45 more. Laughter. Glasses lifted. My palms emptied of heat. Mini cliffhanger. Would they still laugh when they saw what I had to show? When the servers wheeled the cake into the light, a murmur rose. No groom on top, just the bride, her tiny arms outstretched as if asking the room a question. Frosting letters across the face. The truth. "Where's the groom?" someone joked. "Parking the car," Carol said. Dryly, and a few folks smothered smiles, I stood. The knife lay flat against my palm like a declaration, the ring box with the USB warm at my hip. Daniel's eyes searched mine, brown, worried, that little crease he'd had as a child when he broke something and tried to hide it behind his back. I brushed his sleeve. "Whatever happens, I'm still your mother," I whispered. "That has never been a lie." I clicked the remote. The slideshow shifted from sepia summers to clean, ruthless light. Receipts, dates, transfers. The hotel door captured mid-close, Bob's large silhouette holding it for Catherine. A copy of the Cayman itinerary with 2 passenger names, R. Montgomery and K. Reynolds. The room didn't gasp all at once. It inhaled in ripples. One table, then another. You could hear napkins drop, forks clink against porcelain. Reverend Johnson's mouth opened and forgot how to form words. Linda gripped my hand under the table. Mrs. Thompson stared with the sharpness of a woman seeing her hedges in a new, indecent light. Bob laughed first. Of course he did. "Maggie, what is this?" He spread his hands to coax the room back into the shape of a party. "Some prank?" "Is it?" I asked, my voice steady, older than the chandelier. "Which part should I laugh at, Robert? The bank transfer or the joint account? The one-way ticket or the ring you promised someone else while I was darning socks?" The mask slipped, a hairline break, but enough. His jaw jumped. A sheen of sweat blinked across his forehead. He reached for the water glass. His hand trembled. A small percussive truth the microphone politely amplified. "Excuse me," he said, voice suddenly restricted, as if his collar remembered it was too tight. He took a step, then another, toward the exit, past the cake, past the bride, who stared forward without blinking. Catherine rose a beat later, caught between roles, lover, friend, spectator at a play where the curtains had rebelled. "Stay," I told the room, not raising my voice, just setting it down like a stone. "We've celebrated appearances for a long time. Tonight, I'd like to honor reality. If this were your table, if you were sitting among friends while the truth arrived dressed to kill, would you get up or stay seated? Tell me, honestly." Bob paused at the door. He looked at me the way you look at a house you're about to abandon, an inventory, a calculation, a regret too selfish to count as remorse. Then the tremor in his gut overruled his need to perform. He disappeared down the hallway toward the restrooms, Catherine gliding after him with the practiced urgency of a woman who has hidden other men before. I turned back to the cake. 45 years, I said into the microphone. "Everyone told me that's a lifetime, but it turns out it was a dress rehearsal for tonight." I slid the ring box open and showed the small metallic tongue of the USB to the front row like a communion wafer of facts. I won't raise my voice. I won't curse. I'm simply going to cut. The knife split the frosting between the words, "thee" and "truth." Sugar gave way with a sigh. Somewhere down the corridor, a door slammed and shoes scuffed in a hurry. On the far side of the room, phones lifted, not out of malice, but out of that modern impulse to hold proof when the world insists you're being dramatic. Daniel stood slowly. "Mom," he said, voice hovering between child and man, "do you want me to stop all this?" I met his steady eyes. "No, sweetheart," I said. "I want you to see me." And for the first time in a very long time, I felt seen. The banquet hall carried that stunned hush that follows a thunderclap. Forks froze mid-air, wine glasses trembled on white linen, and every guest sat stiff as pews. No one was sure if they were still at an anniversary party or a public trial. Robert hadn't returned from the hallway. Catherine's heels had clicked after him, but the silence of their absence roared louder than any toast. I stood knife-sticky with buttercream and looked out at faces that had always assumed they knew our story. It was time to show them the chapters he'd written in secret ink. Daniel rose from his chair. His voice wavered. "Mom, maybe we should stop this. It's too much." The crack in his voice carried me back to the boy who once asked if Dad would come home for Christmas. I had shielded him then, and I wanted to shield him now. But shielding had only turned us invisible. I cupped his cheek. "Danny, love, sometimes the truth hurts more when it's hidden. Tonight we face it together." He blinked, torn between loyalty to the father he idolized and the mother who raised him. The whole room waited, hungry for his choice. The door banged open. Catherine stepped in first, her lipstick smeared, her face pale like plaster cracking. She hovered at the threshold, then slid into her seat, trying for composure, but her trembling hands betrayed her. A murmur rippled. Is that her? The other woman? At their anniversary? Then Robert appeared. Sweat beaded his forehead, his tie hung loose, his jaw clenched. He forced a laugh, but his body betrayed him. Steps too quick, hand pressing his stomach, eyes darting like a trapped animal. "Enough games, Maggie," he rasped. "You've made your point. Let's end this circus." "Have I made my point?" I asked, not to him, but to the crowd, our friends, our neighbors, even Reverend Johnson. Or has he made it? 45 years of marriage, and this is the man I shared my home with, the man who called me loyal while he bought plane tickets for someone else. Catherine bristled. "You don't understand." The entire room swiveled toward her like one body. For years she had been a shadow. Now she was under a spotlight. Her cheeks flushed as she stared down at her untouched glass. "Sit down, Kate," Robert barked. That slip, the intimate name in front of everyone, was its own confession. If you were Catherine, would you stay and bear the stares or run before they swallowed you whole? Angela had given me more than photographs. She had dug deeper, into bank accounts, into a Cayman Islands condo contract. I held the folder now, heavy as stone. "This wasn't a fling," I said, my voice like a gavel. "This was a plan, a second life. Money stolen from our savings, my years of sacrifice funding his escape." Gasps erupted. Hands flew to mouths. Carol leaned forward, whispering, "Oh my Lord." I laid the condo contract on the table, sliding it toward the crowd. Signed, Robert Montgomery. Witness, Catherine Reynolds. A future without me. Robert lunged for the papers, but Daniel blocked him, my son, no longer a boy clinging to my skirt, but a man standing between us. "Dad," Daniel said, voice low but firm, "is this true?" Robert opened his mouth, but no words came. It was the silence that condemned him, the silence of a man with no more excuses. For the first time, I saw Robert smaller than me, not in body, but in dignity. Daniel's face hardened. He drew in a breath, then exhaled the sentence that cut deeper than any knife. "Mr. Montgomery, I don't know who you are anymore." The room shivered. Robert staggered back, his hand slipping from his son's arm, his face folding into lines he could no longer iron out. I reached into my purse. "This celebration," I said softly, "wasn't just about exposing lies. It was about reclaiming truth. And the law is on my side." Out came Sharon White's prepared papers, separation filings, injunctions, copies for court. I laid them on the table beside the cake. Frosting smeared their edges, as if even sweetness wanted to brand itself with justice. "You tried to erase me, Robert," I said, lifting my chin, "but you've written your own ending, not with fists, not with shouting, with evidence." The audience sat spellbound, caught between pity and justice, between spectacle and sermon. Robert swayed, his body torn between pride and the pepper oil truth seeping into his skin. Catherine fluttered at his side, her hand hovering, useless. I did not move toward him. I did not offer comfort, because for the first time in 45 years, comfort belonged to me. If you were me, would you reach out or let him fall? What does forgiveness mean when betrayal runs this deep? The room held its breath, and I stood at the edge of a new life, the storm inside me breaking at last into light. There's a moment when everything you've prepared either collapses or catches fire. For decades, Robert commanded the stage of our marriage. His voice, his decisions, his betrayals hidden beneath the polite applause of appearances. But that night, beneath the chandeliers of the country club, the tide finally receded and left him stranded, exposed. The pepper oil I had smoothed on his skin hours earlier now pulsed through him like a quiet drumbeat. His swagger had drained away. Sweat slicked his temples, darkening his starched collar. He tried to laugh, but the sound cracked like glass underfoot. "Enough," he croaked, gripping a chair to stay upright. "Maggie, you've made your scene. Stop humiliating me." "Humiliation," I said evenly, "is earned." Behind him, Catherine hovered, eyes darting, hands fluttering, desperate to pull him out of the fire, but too ashamed to touch the flames herself. Across the room, phones glowed like a constellation, capturing every second. Carol Miller's eyes gleamed with vindication. Mrs. Thompson whispered to her husband, their heads shaking. Reverend Johnson clutched his Bible but did not speak. Perhaps he searched for a verse to rescue the moment, but none would come. And Daniel, my son, my heart, stood beside me, jaw tight, gaze locked on his father. For years he had idolized the man who coached his baseball games, who taught him to tie a tie. Now he saw the man who planned to abandon us for an island fantasy. "Say something," Daniel demanded, his voice breaking with anger. "Tell me this isn't true." Robert only groaned, his body betraying his silence. Mini cliffhanger. Would he confess or crumble? I reached for the velvet ring box once more. Inside, the USB Angela had prepared glinted under the lights like a secret bullet. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice calm, almost teacherly, "you've seen the pictures, the receipts, the transfers. But just in case there was doubt..." The screen flickered. A video appeared. There was Robert stepping into a hotel lobby with Catherine, his arm wrapped around her waist, kissing her cheek as they waited for the elevator, gesture tender and practiced. Then the clip cut to a screenshot of their joint bank account, followed by an email with the subject line, "Our new life in Cayman." Gasps echoed like a gust of wind. Some guests clutched their pearls. Others shook their heads, murmuring, "I can't believe it." Robert lunged for the projector, but his body failed him. His legs buckled. The room erupted, not in panic, but in shock at the unraveling of a man once held high. I lifted the microphone. My hand did not shake. "For 45 years, I was his wife," I said. "I raised his child, cared for his mother, tended his home. I gave everything, my youth, my health, my dreams. And what did he give back? Lies, betrayal, plans to erase me." Silence. My words carved through the air like a blade. "This villa," I declared, pointing to the photo of the Cayman condo on the screen, "was supposed to be theirs. But this home," I pressed my hand against my chest, "will always be mine. Because respect is not bought. It's not hidden in offshore accounts. It is earned through love and kindness, and he forfeited it." Catherine tried to speak, her voice brittle as a snapped twig. "Maggie, please, you don't understand. He told me it was over between you two. He said..." "Enough," I cut her off. "I am not your confessor. Take your excuses to the mirror. I will not hold them for you." Her cheeks flushed crimson. She stood abruptly, knocking over her chair, and fled the room under a barrage of whispers. Phones tracked her exit like spotlights in a theater. If you were Catherine, would you run out or stay seated and bear the stares? Daniel stepped forward, his eyes wet but fierce. He looked at Robert, slumped, sweating, his pride dissolving, and spoke with a voice I had never heard from him, steady and unyielding. "All my life you told me what it means to be a man," he said, "but tonight I see the truth. A man is not someone who hides, who betrays, who abandons. A man is someone who stands, who honors, who protects." He paused, chest rising with the weight of his decision. "From now on, you are not my father. You are simply Robert Montgomery." The words fell like a guillotine. Robert flinched as if struck. His mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Mini cliffhanger. Would he finally speak, or let silence be his last defense? I raised Sharon White's documents high, the legal filings, the injunctions, the protection of decades of sacrifice. "This is not revenge," I said, my voice ringing clear. "This is justice, and justice begins tonight." The guests, once stunned, now nodded. Some even clapped softly, not out of cruelty, but out of respect, for a woman who had finally reclaimed her power. Robert collapsed into a chair, his body trembling, his dignity shattered. He was no longer the king of the banquet. He was a man undone by his own secrets, felled by the truth. The room shifted. Women leaned closer, their eyes bright with recognition. I could feel it, the silent chorus of those who had lived similar betrayals, who had swallowed pain to keep peace. In my voice, they heard their own. If you've ever watched someone expose the truth in public, tell me, did it feel like justice for you too? Would you have had the courage to do the same? In that moment, I wasn't just Maggie Montgomery. I was every woman who had ever been cast aside, every wife whose love was traded for lies, every mother whose sacrifices were dismissed. The music had stopped long ago. The waiters stood frozen, unsure whether to clear plates or clap. The cake sat, half cut, its lonely bride figurine staring ahead, unbothered by the chaos below. I lowered the microphone, my voice softened. Tonight is not the end of me. It is the beginning. The chandelier light caught the papers in my hand, the USB in the box, the crimson letters on the cake. All of it formed a tableau, a scene no guest would ever forget. And as Robert bowed his head, defeated, I finally exhaled. For the first time in 45 years, I felt free. The country club emptied slowly, like a theater after a tragic play. Guests whispered in little knots as they slipped into the parking lot, their heels tapping against marble, their murmurs carrying pieces of my truth like fragile shards of glass. No one lingered for dessert. No one sang. They left with eyes averted, as though they feared cutting themselves on the wreckage of my marriage. When the last door clicked shut, I remained in the center of the silent hall. The cake stood half cut, its lonely bride tilting to one side, exhausted from holding her pose. I stared at her and thought, she's me. She's every woman who stood alone, but still stood tall. Robert sat slumped at the edge of the stage, drained and broken. Catherine had vanished into the night. No one chased after her. Daniel hovered beside me, his arm brushing mine, quiet but steady. "Do you want me to help him home?" Daniel asked, voice low. "No," I said. "That's no longer my duty. He made his bed. Let him lie in it." It wasn't cruelty. It was truth. For 45 years, I had carried him like an extra limb. That night, I severed it. Mini cliffhanger. Would I feel grief in the morning, or only relief? The following weeks blurred with paperwork and whispers in the neighborhood. Carol Miller brought casseroles. Linda called each evening. Reverend Johnson offered prayers. But I didn't need pity. I needed air. I packed Robert's clothes into boxes and set them on the porch. His shoes lined up like soldiers awaiting orders that would never come. He never returned for them. A courier collected the lot. That was the last time his belongings crossed my threshold. Inside, I repainted the walls, pale blue in the kitchen, warm cream in the bedroom. Each brushstroke was a declaration. This is my home, now. Mine. At night, I sometimes sat by the window with a cup of tea, not to mourn the betrayal, but to remember the fragments before it. Robert as a young man holding Daniel's tiny hand, road trips across Georgia, radio crackling. The time he danced me barefoot across the kitchen tiles. I allowed myself those memories because they belonged to me too. His lies could not erase my love, nor the life I gave. But I no longer lived there. If you've looked back on a love that turned bitter, do you keep the good parts or burn it all down? Justice, I learned, is not a scream. It is a signature. Weeks later, I sat in a courtroom as the judge read through Sharon White's filings. Robert sat across from me, thinner, grayer, his once booming voice reduced to a mutter. Catherine was nowhere in sight. The judge acknowledged my decades of sacrifice, the evidence of betrayal, the financial theft, assets frozen, accounts divided, properties reassigned. When the gavel fell, I didn't cheer. I simply breathed. Justice hadn't returned what I lost, but it gave me something new: dignity. Daniel moved back home for a time, not because I needed him, but because he couldn't stand the silence of watching me eat alone. He cooked sometimes, burned garlic bread, oversalted stew, but I ate every bite gratefully. One night, he asked softly, "Mom, do you regret it? All those years?" I thought carefully. No, I regret him, not me. I regret what he did, not what I gave, because love freely given is never wasted, even if the person wasn't worthy. Daniel's eyes grew wet. "I'm proud of you." In that moment, every lonely hour, every sleepless night, every tear shed in silence, it was all answered. Mini cliffhanger. Could pride from my son heal wounds deeper than betrayal? If you've stayed with me this far, perhaps you're searching for the moral. It's simple. Respect isn't guaranteed by vows, by blood, by years. Respect must be earned every single day through kindness, honesty, and staying when it would be easier to run. Robert lost everything not because I punished him, but because the truth punished him. Lies always collapse under their own weight. And me? I gained myself back. Now I turn to you, the one listening. If you were in my shoes, would you have exposed him in public? Or would you have kept the peace to avoid shame? Have you faced betrayal so deep it made you question your worth? If so, know this: you are not alone. Here, every story is a lantern, lighting the path for someone stumbling in the dark. Hoy kelay kao chuyan mabantong trai kwa hoak chung kian, biet jau niung guay o jai se jong kam voi ban. On my 68th birthday, I stood beneath the magnolia tree in my backyard. The blossoms were heavy, sweet, forgiving. I closed my eyes and whispered, "Respect isn't given by blood. It's earned through love and kindness." I was no longer Maggie the invisible wife. I was Maggie the survivor, Maggie the truth teller, Maggie the woman who chose herself. And as the wind rustled the magnolia leaves, I felt finally free. If my story touched you, leave a comment below. Share your own battles, your lessons, your twists. Because together we remind each other, no one has to endure in silence. And don't forget to subscribe to Twist Stories for more tales of sacrifice, betrayal, and shocking turnarounds. Every week we rise, we heal, and we find justice, one story at a time.